The next person that I'm actually going to bring up is, speaking of energy, we're going to bring up Lori Singleton with DTE Energy. And so Lori, the foundation of Lori's 20-year career has been her passion for bringing people together through design of vital public spaces. As a design director and senior landscape architect at SmithGroup, Lori focuses on transformative placemaking in urban areas, leveraging vacant, poorly utilized, or simply forgotten places while synthesizing the desires of the client and the community. She maximizes the potential of every project. Lori uses the project's performance needs and the realities often limited community resources to drive design, creativity, crafting tactical solutions that are both functional and beautiful. So without further ado, let's bring up Lori Singleton.
I'll begin just by saying DTE hired SmithGroup about just a year ago to start master planning and designing the neighborhood around their headquarters facility just outside of downtown Detroit. So one year ago, Sean mentioned earlier a project that we'll visit this afternoon that really started to be envisioned 10 years ago. So just put in perspective what happens within a year versus what happens in 10 years. But really, it's interesting for an energy company to be thinking about development around their own institution and their own headquarters. This is sort of a different ball game for them. It's not the typical things that they're thinking about, the typical ways that they're working, but they're starting to recognize their influence in the communities where they work, and in this case, in the community where they live. I'm going to do this like I'll create the pictures for you. I want to say that really, if anyone's familiar, who's been to Detroit? Does anyone spend any time at all in Detroit? DTE Energy's headquarters, just outside of downtown, they've stayed there through thick and thin through all these years. In the process of being there for the last several decades, they've kind of invested in the area around their building with very high quality open spaces, many times kind of cordoned off from the city to make it feel safe and comfortable for their employees, and not at all connected. If you had an image for me to share with you, do you need a file? Because I do have a thumb drive if you're not pulling it up. Got it, okay. You know, what's currently surrounding the headquarters is vast lots of vacant parcels, basically utilized for surface parking and parking decks. And over the years, they've brought food services, everything into the building so that you could come in the morning as a commuter and never have to leave again. So now the time has changed, the city is evolving, their relationship with the city is evolving, and their desire to be better connected, including a new beautiful park they just designed and developed and opened and are heavily programming called Beacon Park just outside their perimeter. Their goals as an institution or as an organization have brought into to really talk about being a force for growth and prosperity in the communities where they work. And they've made headlines just this last year with 3 significant projects: a new blue water energy center, and providing renewable energy sources as a demonstration for 5 events at the new Little Caesars Arena. So they're kind of reaching out and trying to demonstrate a transformation in the way they work in terms of energy, but moving outside of their traditional role as a force for growth. They have many new goals, which I don't have in front of me to tell you about. This is really difficult. Just throw out there a presentation without any of my slides. Okay, right there, that's a good one. That's a good one. So helping communities be stronger and supporting the middle class, being a catalyst for neighborhood revitalization, reducing carbon emissions by more than 80% by 2050, simulating local economies, activating spaces and enhancing walkability and safety. That's an interesting goal for an energy company to have. I think I'm particularly interested in how that makes it into the mix, but you'll see as we're developing their neighborhood plan how that plays out. And then also integrating this with the Detroit Action Sustainability Agenda. So as we started developing the plan for their neighborhood, and I'll just show you quickly this beginning picture that, well, actually it'll come back up in a minute. We did it through the lens of their own goals relative to people, place, and planet. and also the Detroit Action Sustainability Agenda, so Detroit's framework for sustainability, and the lens of LEED and D and eco districts and the kinds of things that they can start to envision. And to set the tone, this was really an opportunity for them to say, how can we better connect to our neighborhood? Not necessarily an initiative that began with how can we be the best neighborhood to demonstrate energy and water and all of the district scale thinking that could be envisioned. So we're working through helping them understand what's possible here. So this is an image of the neighborhood context. Their headquarters is just off the page to the right. You can see these lush landscapes. You can also potentially see, do I have a pointer by any chance? That around these spaces are borders that have no connections to the sidewalks. That's the way that that's the way that these spaces have been developed for years. So the desire to reopen is a big cultural shift. But you can also see that the river, Detroit River, is just 6 blocks away. You would never sense it being here. As many years as I lived in Detroit, I've never felt connected to the river when I was here. And they also have just vast amounts of underutilized land and very few residents, a major commuter neighborhood. But it is right on the edge of downtown, and you've probably all heard things about what's happening in Detroit, and downtown is just incredible. The district Detroit to the north is the entertainment district with the new Little Caesars Arena. Corktown with the new Ford redevelopment of the train station just on the other side, and West Riverfront with a new park coming, $50 million new park on the riverfront, and the whole connected green spine along the Detroit River that now is getting close to meeting up with this neighborhood. Again, partners on all sides that are doing great work in redevelopment and making things happen and creating a sense of identity have been brought to the table to be participants and help DTE understand what's possible here. But just for a sense of scale, 3.5 million square feet of development underway just in 2018, and 1.5 billion being invested, and this is just on all sides of the neighborhood. So what's interesting is there isn't a big resident community. There's a limited worker community, mostly DTE and a couple other institutions. So we brought these other neighborhood partners to the table to start to envision what might be possible here. And these were city leaders, nonprofits, mobility experts, and these development partners to envision how green space and green infrastructure can be a driver, how affordable residential options can link community amenities into the program. So the desire and the need for schools and early childhood centers linked to affordable housing, linked to these employment centers. DTE alone is a huge employment base within this neighborhood, and how can it better serve both its employees and be a great place for downtown workers to have a neighborhood that they can afford and call home just blocks outside of the downtown core. We also went out into the community, and this is interesting because we did a series of surveys, and we went out to events at Beacon Park. This one was an attempt at a world record for all of the most ugly Christmas sweaters in one location at one time. We failed by a large margin to meet that goal. But in the process, we would ask people, here's a survey. We would love for you, when your hands have defrosted, to go through the survey and tell us what you think is possible in this neighborhood. And they said, this neighborhood, like what neighborhood? This isn't a neighborhood. And people who worked there every day, who lived in the 2 apartment buildings, couldn't envision, never imagined to themselves that it actually was one. And here you see everything that's happening on all sides around it. So once we got over that hump of, well, imagine that it was one. Look around you. Look at all the land where this is possible. It's a very land-rich area. What could we do? Really taking advantage of the current investments like the great park that's there by surrounding it with new development, making that development mixed use with jobs, home, shopping opportunities, amenities for families. This was a thing we heard quite a bit, that a lot of the downtown area is really built for millennials. What can we do to support families, all families? Access to fresh food. That's a downtown area that's lacking, that has been changing over time, but this location can serve so many different downtown neighborhoods. And then improving connectivity and green systems through walkability and connections to the riverfront that's just a few blocks away. So the plan, and this is a plan that's continually evolving. Today it doesn't even look like this anymore. It just keeps moving. We're just a year into the process, but it's really focused on orienting the plan around green space and connectivity. Again, we're land rich. We have the opportunity to make this a unique neighborhood in Detroit. Detroit is not a city in a park. It is not a city of parks. The parks that are there are relatively underutilized. There's a lot of land. There's a lot of land that's green, but that land isn't a land that people in the city connect to, feel welcomed in, feel like they can utilize, and that is really successfully performing any value. So it's really shaped around that with new catalytic development that can help anchor this as a new downtown neighborhood. So, you know, with the Detroit River in the background in this image, kind of from the windows of the headquarters that are just to the left, how can we take, you know, parking lots and very wide streets and rethink them with new developments that are scaled with pedestrian spaces, excuse me, stitched throughout, places for people that are at multiple levels. So we're thinking about roofs, not just to support building systems, but also for energy, for public space, and for landscape. Looking at greenway connections that are really ecological corridors connecting back to the river. Looking at this sprawling and suburban environment that exists today with these kind of defensive offsets that the landscape provides, and thinking about how they can be, the places themselves can start to shape the experience in the neighborhood with new development that's scaled and transition down to allow light into these spaces as development emerges, integrating, as I said, early child care centers into the core of them so that that's really well-distributed network. And then really thinking about all of the layers, including how places are created and how building systems interact with the landscape, and how we think larger about those systems approaches to doing this. So this DTE themselves only owns a certain degree of this land, but they have the opportunity here to lead and to start to shape how all of the other partners surrounding them can be more thoughtful about developing these systems. And this is, again, just initially in the works, but really thinking about a people-first strategy. Oh, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so just, you know, the early visions are really focused around this blue-green network here at Angel. Thank you. A blue-green network that is taking the green system of both parks and connectivity and linking them together with green infrastructure. So we reopen closed streets. That's where letter B is 2nd Avenue. That's been closed with private, larger parcels that have been conglomerated, and reopen that as a pedestrian spine that links stormwater from the headquarters open spaces down to a new, larger district-scaled stormwater park where letter C is located, and then again linking those all the way down to the riverfront, both in terms of open space and in terms of stormwater systems. And then also linking the buildings, the darker gray, the medium gray are all new developments within the area. How can those water systems be linked into this network as well? Connectivity, we are planning for enhanced bike systems, off-road bike systems as much as possible, particularly where letter D is along 3rd Street, which connects down to the Detroit River. That's that extra wide street that now we can repurpose and rethink about how that width is utilized for a great green connector all the way down to the riverfront. So suddenly those 6 blocks that feel really far away feel really short and connected. And this is all linked to a much larger loop that's citywide. Also linking with the bus systems, the bus networks, decreasing wait times. All of this has been initially coordinated, and there's a lot of collaboration between all of the entities about what's possible moving forward. And then, of course, the other systems and the building systems and how those can translate at a district scale and at a site scale. So when we're developing the plans for the park, how are we thinking about the opportunity for geothermal? When we're talking about the rooftop systems, how are we thinking about photovoltaics? The roofs alone, there's a large casino that's part of the district. How can the roofs within this network provide energy? Here it could actually supply up to 330,000 square feet of office space through rooftop generation alone. And this is all new potential development. And really thinking about how innovations and intersections come together. So what can DTE do through their goals to kind of demonstrate what they're working toward right here in their own neighborhood? So excuse me. So really, again, we just started the process a year ago. None of this is fully quantified and fully developed, and we're setting the stage and really working with partners who will help to envision this and finalize this plan. DTE is not a developer. They're not a land developer. They're not doing all of this work themselves. They're working with partners, but they're able to set the vision and set the tone and bring this work to fruition over the future. So we're pretty excited about what can come out of this as they kind of embrace the opportunity to lead in this area. Thank you.